Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode 2 of Desert Island Games here on Retro Bear YouTube channel. This is Retro Bear speaking to you live from the comfort of my escape vehicle, as we once again put another YouTube gamer through the rigmarole of being deserted on Desert Island with some of his favourite and not so favourite games. Those of you who watched our first episode on this with Griffo, Alex Griffiths of Griffo's Retro Gaming a few weeks ago, thank you very much indeed for those of you who did listen to that and gave us some great feedback on it. Hope you enjoyed it. So we've lined up another victim this week. The purpose of this, if you haven't heard it before, is we ask our YouTube guests to pick 8 games from their history. Games that mean the most to them. 6 games we asked them to pick of their favourites. We also asked them to pick one game where if they were stuck on a desert island, they would have more time to put into that they perhaps haven't done so before, or a game they want to explore a bit more. And one game for some reason that is there that they absolutely hate because it's going to make their life a bit of a misery. After all, it can't be all sort of coconuts and palm trees on these desert islands. I should point out that this machine that they're being left with can play any game in history, and that can be from the very basic first computer games right the way through to the current massive Switch, Xbox One, PlayStation 4 titles, or even the mobile games. It can also play online games, but we would ask you not to send any rescue messages because that really defies the point of what we're trying to do. So my guest for episode 2 is a channel that I've been watching for quite some time, and a really nice guy, and I'm really pleased he's agreed to do this because I think this is going to be an absolutely cracking chat. He's got a fantastic games console computer history as well to go through, which will run alongside the games. So I'd like to bring in my guest this week, Retro48k, who I'm going to refer to during this conversation as Chris. Chris, hello there.
Hello there, thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Thank you very much indeed for agreeing to do this. I know you were quite enthusiastic about it, so that's even better. Right, you have your own YouTube channel, so perhaps if you'd like to give us a brief overview for those who don't know what you're all about on YouTube, and I will point out that we will put a link to your channel in the description below.
Yeah, so the channel is obviously called Retro48k. Slightly misleading because it's not just Spectrum stuff. I tend to cover everything. I call it 48k because I started gaming back in Spectrum days, and I cover everything right through to modern. And just whatever covers my fancy. I do reviews, I do technical discussions on how machines work, I do pick up videos, stuff like that. Bit of everything, really.
What do you find works best on your channel?
I find the ones that people seem to enjoy the most and I get the most engagement out of are the technical ones where I maybe explain how the Saturn works or how the Mega Drive creates its graphics and things like that. People seem to really enjoy them ones, and I quite enjoy making them. The only downside to them is they take quite a lot of time to put together.
That's what it is. I find that my more popular videos are the ones that tend to go on the most and the longest, but the more in-depth ones. But yes, I mean, for someone like myself who's I appreciate these sort of games machines. I don't actually really understand how a lot of them work, to be fair. But I do find that sort of stuff really interesting, and certainly some of the things on your channel I've really enjoyed from that point of view. And I think you've got a great sort of style as well, very sort of laid back, and it's very easy to listen to, and I like watching your pickups as well, and your reviews are really good as well. So like I said to anybody out there, if they haven't checked it before, we'll put the description in the link below and you can pop along and see what Chris is all about. So Chris, we started, obviously you mentioned right there at the very start that the channel's Retro48k, or they're not to do with the Spectrum games, but I dare say probably around that time that's where you sort of got first into gaming, I would guess from that.
Yeah, it would be, I don't know the exact year, but it would be the late 80s. It was actually my sister got a ZX Spectrum for Christmas one year, and it basically became mine just through me showing more interest in it than her, and just playing what I deem to be sort of the classics from that system in terms of, fortunately Dave, the Dizzy games I always look back to on there, and even ones that everyone seems to play, but no one, like I used to love Colin the Cleaner. I still think that's a brilliant game that no one really talks about, which was just a little puzzler where you had to tidy up a museum.
Oh yeah. I've not heard of that one at all.
It's really quite a basic game. I think there's only about 20 levels in, but yeah, it's just dead simple. You're a little guy and you can walk around the screen, and there's teleporters and ladders that you can go up and down, and you just to pick up items of litter in various museums. So one level might be the shape of a sphinx or something like that. But if you go drop down a step, you die. So you've got to sort of tackle the level in the right order, and a lot of it is figuring that out. And it's dead basic game, but it really hooked me. And I just remember playing that for hours with my sister.
But those are the sort of games that work back then when we, from our era, when we first started playing them, because my introduction was a 2600, then on to my friend's Commodore 64s. But the most basic of games, if the gameplay was there, you didn't care how basic it was, and that was what sort of drew you back in, how it played, and the addictiveness of sort of a game like that, simple to look at, but absolute joy to play.
Yeah, I think that that's why I think Spectrum games, some of them really hold up, and some of them are absolute terrible. And the ones that I tend to find are terrible are the ones where they've tried to do more than the platform was capable of. They didn't focus on that addictive nature. The Spectrum's perfect for sort of little arcadey shooter games or little puzzlers like that with simple concepts that just hook you in.
God, sorry.
No, I was just saying, and where it doesn't tend to work for me is the games where they maybe tried to go a bit too beyond what the system was capable of. So
the computer was bought for your sister. Was that the idea? Was it an older sister or a younger sister?
Yeah, it was an older sister. She's about four and a bit years older than me. And given my age, she must have been approaching. She would have been secondary school, so I would assume it was bought for her in terms of learning a bit of that, because during the 80s they had that whole drive for BBCs in every secondary school and stuff like that. So it was probably bought for that reason, I would have thought. But it was never used for that. It was always used for games, as everyone did.
Yes, you're absolutely right. No one ever bought. Everyone's bought a computer for educational purposes. No one has actually used a computer for educational purposes, as far as I was aware. There are two completely different things. You can buy it for one, but what you use it for is completely different. And it was no different in my house as well. So I'm sure many people can completely relate to that. Did she ever get into games after that at all, or was it just
kind of? I mean, through my early, the first few systems that I've got, we would play a lot of two-player games together, and some, the odd games. She was always into games like Columns and things like that, but she kind of grew out of it fairly quickly. Whereas for me, it was just the start.
Yeah, but my sister was probably the other way, younger. 4 years younger than me, and I can, we did play the occasional two-player game, but I can never get her to take up the interest in it. And as far as I'm aware, she's got absolutely no interest in it whatsoever now. So it's strange how things like that happen, though. Because my parents bought her a Game Boy, which I think I've never actually saw her play on. I'd love to know what happened to it, because it just sort of disappeared, and she was never a gamer, so I don't know. Anyway,
it's weird how most of my gaming equipment ended up at her house at some time or other. Though I think some of her boyfriends through the years would borrow consoles and whatnot, and they'd just end up living
there. So you moved on from the Spectrum. Now, having been through your list here, there was one console which I noticed was missing from that list. There's anyone I could think of. Although I'm pretty sure. No, I think it's maybe two. I think now, just looking at it again. But after the Spectrum, you then moved to consoles.
Yes.
And whereas a lot of us probably would have moved in one direction, you end up moving into the direction of.
Yeah, I went for the NES. I'm probably one of the few people in the retro community that actually had a NES back in the day.
Yeah.
Everyone seemed to went with the Master System, and I went with the NES.
Yeah, so we had this discussion. We had this discussion so many times before in the past, in recent months, about the fact that nobody knew anybody with a NES. Everybody either had a Master System or an Atari 2600 or a Commodore 64 or a Spectrum around the same time. But so how did you manage to get hold of one of those?
So again, it was a Christmas present, and I've still got actually somewhere. I was digitizing some old home videos with camcorder footage, and I found the one of me getting that NES that Christmas. So I'm there with Duck Hunt and Mario and Gremlins 2 and all these typical kid at Christmas type ones. And I can't remember why I went for the NES over the Master System, although I do remember, similar to everyone else, all my friends had Master Systems.
Oh, right. So was it to be different, do you think?
Probably. Knowing me, it was probably everyone's gone with this. I'm going with these ones. Because, the first NES game I remember ever playing was Megaman. And I remember going to a local store when stores used to have them set up at the back of the store where you could play on them, and just going straight to that and playing Mega Man, which must have been around the same time, because I've got a feeling that same trip is when my mum and dad were actually buying the NES for Christmas for me. I was just probably too engrossed in actually playing the thing at the back of the store.
Right. Did you have this sort of, having got the NES, do you think I made a terrible mistake here?
No, because I absolutely adored most of the games on it. I did have one friend who had a NES, and he lent me The Legend of Zelda. I had to persuade him like mad, because his parents were quite strict and wouldn't let him lend games out, because they were 40 quid, and back then that must have been like £120 a game or something like that. They were ridiculously expensive.
They were. I remember seeing the price of them in the shop and thinking, goodness me, how ridiculously expensive they were. And I thought, well, my parents would never be able to afford something like that.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I mean, I don't know about a lot of people, but my experience of sort of all the early cartridge system, most of the games I played were thanks to video rental stores. Go and paying £5 to rent a game for a week.
Yeah.
Or a local newsagents on my corner used to do Spectrum games, and then they did NES and Mega Drive games. And they had a £5 swap deal, so you could go in with a £5 and you could swap one of your Mega Drive games for any of their Mega Drive games or NES games. You could do a straight swap, and that's how I played a lot more games than the ones. I never owned more than sort of 7 or 8 at a time, and that was over multiple Christmases, and birthdays and things.
That's really good. I'd never heard of that before. Man, what a great idea that was.
Yeah, it was before sort of pre-owned things, and it was just a way of, when you finished a game, you could go and trade it in for a £5 and get a different one.
So how long did you have the NES for?
It'll have been probably a couple of years, because the next console I got was the Mega Drive, and that was right after Sonic 2 came out, so that'll be about 92-ish.
Right. So why the Mega Drive next then?
So between the NES and Mega Drive, I got a Game Gear and fell in love with Sonic. We spent a lot of time, my sister swam for the county, so we spent a lot of time going to various swimming events and things, so I think my mum and dad just got me a portable console to shut me up in the back of the car.
Now, if you listen to the podcast, I know Gernaldinho had sort of a very much a similar thing. His first introduction to the Game Gear was not in the same fashion, but that was given him to the play, and he spent a lot of time in the back of the car on long journeys playing it, and it was ideal for that sort of thing if he had enough batteries.
Yes, I had rechargeable batteries, and I always remember you turn the sound off and you turn the brightness down as low as you could still see something, just to try and eke that extra 20 minutes of battery life out of them. But yeah, it was Sonic 1 on that I really loved, and interestingly, a neighbour friend of ours had a Mega Drive, a Japanese one, and I remember being at his house once when he put Sonic 1 on that, and just as soon as I saw Sonic 1 on the Mega Drive compared to the Master System, that was it. I had to get a Mega Drive.
I think that was the first reaction for a lot of people when you saw Sonic running at the speed it was, and it's like, wow, this is like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, and it was the Master System. You lost Master System, Game Gear, same version actually. When you lost your rings, it was one ring that went, and that was it. You lost it, and at the end of the levels where you rescued all the animals, there was maybe 3 or 4 of them came out, and I remember first time you got hit and dozens of rings seemed to spew all over the screen.
Yeah,
it was just like, wow, this is like the next level.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't think you could ever sort of recapture that first time you saw it, because you look at it now and think, oh, it's like the edge of, but when you first saw it, it's like, wow, this is just completely on a different scale. And at the time when I saw it, I was obviously quite used to Amiga gaming, and I thought that was pretty impressive, but this was something else.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything quite like, because the Super Nintendo hadn't come out yet, and like you say, it was the speed as well, because it wasn't just more on screen, it was faster than anything and more detailed. It's just, yeah, even from that title screen where he pops up and then wags his finger just sums it up, really, just the attitude of the game. And then you had them weird Sega adverts as well, like the guy in, was it a truck with a games arcade in the back of it or something?
There was that one. I think I remember the one around Sonic 2, which was based in the hairdressers.
Yes. I remember that one.
Which had got the guy out of very well-known actor. Can't remember his name now. It was the barber, and there was another reasonably well-known actor who did a few things afterwards. Was also in those very early ones, but I remember that was like great. You know, I think a friend of mine had a video which was given away, we think, with Mean Machines, which had all sort of the upcoming Mega Drive games, and there was Sonic 2 on that. There's also the advert for that at the very front of it.
And that was kind of the only experience you had of them back then, because I remember with Sonic 2, the TV show Bad Influence.
Yes. Yeah.
Recording the data blast at the end of that, because it had the Sonic 2 level skip in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were the only times you ever saw these games actually running. The most times you'd get a magazine, and you got this really long build up to, Sonic 2 came out in November, and that seemed like an age from that till the Christmas when I got it.
And of course, the data blast at the end of Bad Influence, for those who don't know what we're talking about, was a TV program which used to be on Children's ITV, I think it was.
Yeah.
And what they used to do at the end of each program was sort of put a load of cheats and hints and tips flashed up on the screen, and what you had to do was record it, and then in order to view it, you had to sort of skip through each frame using the pause button. So you could. That was how it worked, wasn't it? I think, yeah.
Yeah. You had to have a special VCR, I think, because at first I don't think I did it, because it recorded it at normal speed, and you had to have one that would play it back slower than you recorded it, or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, those were the days. much more simple to do things that way, because much more difficult as well, because I don't think people have too much difficulty recording programs nowadays. Of course, with VCRs it was much more difficult back then.
But you had to write it down while the screen was shaking like mad on the pause.
But it's never the best quality, was it? I don't know. Well, then again, some people like the old VHSs. I mean, I'm sort of got loads knocking around still. I should get rid of them, really. I've been told to get rid of them, but I'm going to keep hold of them. I don't know why, but and I also know you had a Mega CD as well.
Yes, again, that same friend who had the Japanese Mega Drive, he got the Christmas I got Sonic, he got a Mega CD, and I remember seeing that and being, it's an awful game, but I remember being wowed by Road Avenger. That was for anyone who hasn't played it, it's very much similar to Dragon's Lair. You're a guy in a car, and it's like an animated movie, and all you do is press left, right, accelerate, or brake, and it does different actions. But I at the age I was, it was probably a similar experience to most people who were older in the 80s when they first saw Double Dragon's Lair in the arcades. That kind of, it just was, wow, it's like playing a cartoon.
Well, I mean, that was the attraction of the Mega CD at the time, wasn't it? It could do this full motion video, which when you look back at it now, isn't really all that impressive, but at the time we were sort of like, that was the next level, wasn't it? We'd moved on from sort of the graphics, and we can now actually put sort of full motion video into games, or base games around full motion videos.
Yeah, and because if it wasn't that, all they seemed to do was, and it's one of the reasons why I'd never had very many games for the Mega CD, because most of the games were basically just, here's the Mega Drive version, but with CD quality audio. They seem to have all this disk space and not really know what to do with it.
Do you think it was sort of I won't say ahead of its time, but perhaps the technology was not utilised as it should have been? Yeah,
I think it was ahead of its time, but the actual CD side of it. But then I think it was held back slightly by the power of the Mega Drive attached to it.
Because you had the other systems that came out, you learned the same sort of thing, like the 3DO and the CDI, which never really sort of took off either. And I'm guessing it's probably one of these situations. I mean, I've talked about it. But certain consoles just being there a bit too soon, and had they sort of been released later when the technology had been utilised better or had been unlocked better, then it may have been more of a success.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say for that. I think, in theory, it sounds like a good idea. A lot of people already had a Mega Drive. You don't need to pay the full whack for, say, what a 3DO would cost, just to put an attachment on it. But you almost are, because you're having to replace a lot of the graphics that the Mega Drive was doing anyway. So it both helped and hindered it, I think.
Yeah,
and I think Sega's, they're notorious, aren't they, really, for, they love the hardware, but they don't often back, well, at least at that time, they didn't really often back it up very much. Same with the 32X, it was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that as well. I mean, I think anybody who sort of played on these systems or was around at the time would very much share those sentiments. I just remember seeing, sort of thinking the Mega CDs and the bolt-on top of that, or the 32X bolted on top of that. And they didn't inspire me a great deal. But then again, Mega CDs are incredibly difficult to pick up nowadays. Not cheap either. Have you still got your original one, or has it moved on?
No, it's moved on. I do have a Model 2 Mega CD, which I do love, and they are more reliable than the original Mega CD. But I had the Model 1, which I still think looks sleeker. It's not like the Model 2, especially when you've got a 32X sat on top of it as well, kind of looks like the Mega Drive's on a life support machine. Whereas I think the Model 1 looks a bit more, it looks like it's meant to be there.
I think it's the same with the Mega Drive. The Model 1 is to me is a much better looking console, whereas the Model 2 seems to be a bit uniform.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think the Model 1 has a lot more of that quirky charm to it as well. The fact that it doesn't output stereo sound unless you use the headphone jack and stuff like that. There's a bit more quirkiness to the first one, which I like.
It's got that giant disc thing on the front where the cartridge goes in as well. I mean, you haven't seen that. I mean, obviously, I think the PlayStation one's obviously got the giant disc, but that's where the CD went into. It just looks far better than the Model 2 versions. Go on, sorry. What we'll do, we'll move away from your gaming history for the moment, and let's get on to some of these games which we've stuck you on the desert island with, because I appreciate you're going to be there some time, and I don't want to sort of neglect the opportunity to this. So, as I said at the top, we asked you to pick 6 of your favourite games of all time, which you'd like to be stuck on a desert island with, and we'll do a few of these first, and then as we get towards the end, we'll intersperse the other 2. Which we spoke about at the top of the show. So if you'd like to introduce us to your first game of choice. Please.
So the first game of choice, and the first one on pretty much any favourite list of mine was Final Fantasy VII.
Right. Okay, and why is that such a game that you hold it in such high regard?
There's obviously the one that the parts everyone loves about. I mean, for me, the story behind this one for me, I first played this. A friend bought it at school, and I remember saying with him on Friday, RPGs, I finished Zelda in 3 days. I could finish that by the end of the weekend. It's dead easy. They're just boasting. And he went, go on then, prove it. So he lent it to me over that weekend. and I had to admit to him on the Monday morning, no, I didn't finish.
How far did you get?
I got to the Nibelheim, where you go back there for the second time. So
right.
About 2/3 of the way through the first disc, I would say.
Oh, because it was a 2-disc game, wasn't it? Was it 3?
3-disc, yeah.
3-disc, yeah, 3-disc, yeah.
You're not on the 3rd disc for as long as the other 2, though, because it's a lot of the end full motion video and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, the game just sort of blew me away. I remember playing it, and you start the game, and I remember thinking, this is just going to be do the 7 reactors, and then you defeat the company, and then it opens up into this massive other story that's about meteors going to crash, and I hadn't played a game like that before, and it was just blew me away what JRPGs could be. And I think the reason I still love it to this day is the fun you can have with the battle system. I recently picked it up on the Switch, and for the first time in how is it now, 30 years nearly, I actually beat the 2 optional bosses, the ultimate weapons.
Oh, right. So after all these years on a different system, you actually managed to do that as well?
Yeah, because if anyone's ever played it, the way the fighting system works is you have these materia which you put into slots on your weapons. And the materia gives you magic or commands or abilities. And just there's a huge, because you can customize them to any degree, there's so many options you can do. I mean, for example, the way I beat these bosses was I equipped a magic that did X amount of damage to them, but combined that with one that healed me at the same time, and then had a counter-attack magic. So every time they hit me, I countered attack with one called Mime, which repeats the last command you did. So basically, every time they hit me, I did this massive damage attack, heal myself, and then just repeated that. So I'd set it off, and then I'd just sit there and watch it go through and win by default. So it's just the fact that you can play with it and break the system so much. I think if I was on a desert island, despite the fact that it's a 100-hour game anyway, if you really want to fight, well, probably not, about 40 if you know what you're doing. You've got all them hours, but then you've got all the time playing around with, I wonder if I did this way, or just trying to break the systems in it. I think I'd get a lot of fun out of doing that.
So the replay value is there as well, and a win by default is a win as far as I'm concerned. That makes it, yeah. Was that the first Final Fantasy game you actually played?
Yes, I think like a lot of people, that was my first introduction to them. The closest to an RPG I'd played before that would probably be the Legend of Zelda games on the Super Nintendo.
Right. And have you played any since?
Yes, that got me hooked. So after that one, I got 8, I got 9, got 10. Skipped 11 because it's a MMO and I'm not a big fan of them. Got 12, got 13, skipped 14 because it's an MMO, and got 15. And I haven't finished any other. I haven't finished 12 and I haven't finished 15, but all the others I've played right through, and I've gone back and played some of the early ones as well.
And at that point, when you first picked it up, had you ever played a JRPG before?
No, not like I said. The closest I got would probably be that original Zelda 2 on the NES, because that had the RPG elements of leveling up. But before then, I hadn't even played a proper RPG. It was more the action style ones. I think maybe Secret of Evermore on the SNES I'd maybe played for a bit, but not much.
No. So has this sort of started a lifelong, not say obsession, but an interest in that sort of style of game?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love them now. The only problem I've got nowadays is getting the time to play them.
Well, if you've got a single 100 hours into a game, I mean, at any time of life, that's going to be quite difficult to do. So I just think it's really interesting having never sort of played a game like that before. Especially then as well, because I mean, Final Fantasy VII, that was PlayStation 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that would have been mid-90s, by which point, you've been gaming for a few years by that point and never actually sort of got an interest in them. And then just sort of all of a sudden you play one game and that's it, something just clicks and you sort of follow that all the way through. And as you said, you've gone all the way pretty much through the series.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least with JRPGs, where I live, there wasn't a lot of game shops that did imports. So most of them weren't imported. I mean, the big ones on the Super Nintendo, you like some of your Super Mario RPG, your Chrono Trigger and whatnot, were never released over here.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to get into JRPGs, I recommend Chrono Trigger, by the way. If you've never played it, it's the one game that kind of lives up to the hype that's around it, because a lot of the issues people have with the random battles and things like that aren't in Chrono Trigger. You see the enemies on screen, so you can choose to fight them or you can run past them, and there's a lot of great stuff in that one if everyone wants to play it.
I'm definitely running past them, sort of thing. I must be honest with you. Yeah, I may look at that, because I mean it's a format and style of game that just doesn't really interest me.
I think it's one that you need to have a lot of commitment up front with them, if that makes sense. In terms of, I've never known one where you instantly pick the battle system up and are hooked. The first few hours of them is always just press X to attack, press X to attack, press X to attack. Mm-hmm. It's like playing an Excel spreadsheet for the first few hours.
Yeah, but I like spreadsheets, so that's why it wasn't click with me. But then again, I play Final Fantasy 1 off emulation, and I think people told me that was the wrong one to start playing with, because that bored me stupid after about an hour.
Yeah, I think if you're going to start with one, the modern sort of era of Final Fantasies kind of started around about 4. The first 3 are very difficult to go back to now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I may look into that then, because I can feel the passion coming out in your voice now. You're talking about it, and I'll try anything once. So yeah, it might be worth a go. Okay, Annie. I mean, in terms of that's obviously one of your favourites, the best of the series. If anybody else is sort of listening to that and thinking, is it what other one in the series would you recommend?
There's actually a comment on Facebook groups today. 9 is always the one most series hardcore would say is the best. The reason I don't think it's the best is because 9 has a lot of nods to the other games in the series.
Right.
So if you haven't played the other games, you lose a lot of that experience. But 9 is still, it's probably probably my second favorite out of all of them. It is a really great game in terms of story, really good plot twist in it. The only downside to 9 would probably be if you aren't a big fan of the old school battle systems, it's quite a restrictive battle system. Each character has a job. It's the job system. So you'll have a healer, you'll have a knight, you'll have a thief, and they can only learn abilities that match that job.
Right. Because I'm just going back through when I did it with Eddie and Nath off the TMB group. Nath had got 6 on his list, and Eddie had got 8.
Yeah, I personally, 8 is so broken. It really is.
You've lost him as a friend there, I think.
Yeah. if anyone ever plays 8, you can, within 2 hours of starting that game, you can have access to the final level magics. So you can just breeze through any battle in it. But I suppose to be able to do that, you've kind of have to played it to actually know how the systems and mechanics work. So 8 story-wise is good, but I just think the battle's broken. And 6, I think a lot of people 6 is their favourite. I've tried to play it about 4 or 5 times, and I can see why people think it is. But it's that thing where it doesn't hold the nostalgia for me, that one. So going back to it is I have to force myself to play it, and particularly because I've tried several times. I've played the start of that about 12 times.
Yeah, I think in all fairness to Eddie, I think Final Fantasy VIII was actually on his put more time into game.
Yeah.
Although if it's broken, he might be wasting his time.
But it's one of those that it's broken if you want to break it. Put it that way. If you play the game the way it expects you to play it, it works fine. But if you start thinking, I wonder if I can do this, then it quickly falls down, and you suddenly end up really super powered within about 3 hours of the game.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think you make a very convincing argument for it, and I may have a chance to play one in a couple of weeks' time. So we'll have to sit down and try and look at that. So that's Final Fantasy VII. That's your first game, which is on your favourites list. Let's go with another one off that list, then, Chris. Because I've got a feeling this game's come up before. If you're working in the order you gave me, I think we've had this one come up before. But it's a series very well known.
Yeah. So the next one on my list was Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
That's the one. Yeah. And I think that's come up a few times on conversations we've had. A game which, again, having played it myself for a period of time, and even Mrs. Bear's played it actually as well, and I think she got the same opinion as me, is that I haven't got time to play this.
Yeah.
Because it's just a huge, massive, sprawling game.
It is, and it's actually not my favourite Zelda game. My favourite Zelda game is A Link to the Past. The reason this is me to a T. I spent so much time trying to logically think, well, if I was stuck on a desert island, I'd want games that had a lot of replay value, and with this, because it is so sprawling. Got hundreds of hours in there, and then you've got all the stuff that I don't know if you've seen the videos of people doing online where they're just playing with the physics system. So you set up you use the time freeze mechanic to batter a rock for 20 minutes until it powers up, and then you jump on it and he flies you across the map, and people do mad stuff like that.
I've not seen that. No.
There's all sorts of crazy things that people have done just breaking the physics system, and I just that kind of appeals to me. There's the theme running here of trying to break games.
Well, someone's got to try and do it, haven't they? I mean, that's what they're for, aren't they? I mean, they're there to be played and explored, and if people are finding these sort of things out about them, then even better. So you say it's not your favourite game, but obviously it's one that you can spend a considerable period of time on. What sort of them gave you the reason for putting this on this list?
It's just that time when I've only played it through once because it's a game that takes that amount of time. I'm the type of person that if I start a game, I want to find all the shrines and I want to find all the heart pieces and all that kind of stuff.
You're a completist then.
Yeah, I don't want to be, but I just kind of find myself. My OCD won't let that progress bar not be full.
It's overpowering you when it comes to something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I do like the. If anyone's ever played it, it's not the traditional Zelda formula. It's not the dungeons. You have little shrines where you go in there and you solve short little puzzles that you then get a heart piece or something like that. And because you can actually just finish the game straight away. As soon as you do the tutorial, you can run to the last boss and take him on with your little wooden sword and try and beat him. Which I've seen people do. Yeah, I've seen people do, and it's just like to get to him alone, you've got to dodge lasers and all sorts, and it's just like, yeah, I'm going to go and get super powered up, and then I'll be back. I've played it. I mean, and I know some people sort of said about the fact that with the weapon mechanics, the weapons sort of actually break. Yeah. Which means then you're going to be a bit more resourceful about what you do. Did that add something to it, having played sort of previous Zelda games or not? It didn't. It didn't. It made me approach it differently. You can't just say, "Oh, well, I really like this weapon, so I'm going to keep using this." I actually found similar to a lot of the survival horror games that I really like. I'm like, "Oh, that's a really good weapon. I'll save that. I might need it," and then you end up never using it. It just sits in your inventory because you think, "Well, I might need that for a big boss at some point," and you never actually. You get to a big boss and you won't use it because you might come across a bigger boss later.
Yeah, because I when I first started playing it, and again, it's no idea how far I got with it, and just sort of like doing something, and it broke. Because I very, very played Zelda games for long, so I didn't realise that was a problem. I thought, oh, right, I'm going to go and find another one of these now, and then everyone sort of said, oh no, I don't like it because you break these weapons, and that's it, it's gone. The sword sort of breaks into 1,000 pieces, and you can't use it again. And I don't know. I like the idea of that.
Yeah,
makes it a bit harder.
I never really found it too much of a problem because there's enough weapons scattered around the place that you could pick something else up and use it if you desperately needed.
Well, it'd have to be because it would be rock hard, otherwise you never get anywhere with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the first one. I think Wind Waker on the GameCube, you could pick up some enemy weapons and they broke, but you always had your Master Sword that never broke. Which is actually optional on this. You can decide whether you pick up that Master Sword, and it doesn't break, but it loses its power on Breath of the Wild. So you can only use it for so long, and then it powers down, and you have to wait for it to power back up again.
Which system are you playing it on at the moment?
I'm playing it on the Switch.
And there's the Wii U version as well, which came out first. Did it come out first?
They came out at the same time. Because again, I got this. It came out on launch with the Switch, didn't it? Because I remember getting because one of my collecting things is the Zelda series. So on day one, I got an expensive day. I got the Switch. I got the collector's edition of Breath of the Wild. I got the Wii edition of Breath of the Wild, and I got a standard edition of Breath of the Wild that I could play.
That's some serious spending right there.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's this game a lot of people love. But I think again it falls into that sort of, have I got enough time to sit down and play this? And I mean, obviously, if you've got that amount of time to doing it, people absolutely love this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love most about it that changed it for me is I famously don't like Skyrim and Fallout and games like that. But the reason I love Breath of the Wild over them is I'm the type of person that if it says you need to go here on the map, I'll just take a straight line to that place. I won't follow the path around the mountain. I'll just try and go over the mountain. And I always found that restrictive on Skyrim because you'll get up halfway up the mountain and you'll find an enemy that you can't beat, or you'll find that you can't climb a ledge. Well, on Breath of the Wild, you've just got that climb mechanic. So if you can pace yourself and judge the slopes right, you can literally just go anywhere from the start. And that really appealed to me, the fact that this was actually an open world. It was, truly, if you can see it, you can get to it.
It's a beautiful looking game as well. It really is.
Yeah, it really shows you don't need a huge amount of horsepower to get something that looks really nice.
Yeah, because I think when people, think it's actually, on the Switch, it's not available on any other consoles, and the other ones are obviously way more capable of doing something like that. And when it runs on the Switch, it's an absolutely beautiful, crisp piece looking software. It really is. Okay, so that's Zelda. That's the second one off your list. Let's go back to your gaming history, Chris, because we've talked about Mega Drive earlier. Where do you end up after that?
So the next one I got after that, I have no idea when. It was the Amiga 500 Plus.
The Plus version.
Yes, I just remember my uncle turned up with it on the doorstep one day and said, "Do you want this?" I was like, "Yes."
You're not going to say no, are you?
Yeah, I think he just got a 1200. So that was going spare. So he said, "Do you want it?" And again, that was just a whole another raft of technology that I wasn't used to. I mean, initially, it did seem like a backward step. When you go from cartridges to floppy disks and you're having to do loading screens, you think, "Oh, what's happening here?" But then some of the games on it are just, to this day, Cannon Fodder is one of my favourite games, and Syndicate.
And Syndicate, yeah.
Brilliant games.
I grew up with the 500, and it's still one of my favourite systems of all time. Did play some right rubbish on it as well. Probably didn't utilise it best, but I just was happy to have a system on my own for the first time, and I can play all the games that were coming out and I used to read about rather than read about them and watch other people playing them. I mean, of course, we going back. You talking about the Spectrum at the very start. The Amiga was bought for educational purposes.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I think I got Coral Draw and all sorts with it that I never used.
I think I had Deluxe Paint 3, and there was Dr. T's Music Studio, and I did have a word processor as well. But it sat in the drawer.
Yeah, I remember fighting on with. I can't remember what the word package on it was, but getting that and getting a printer set up, and the big beast of the printer that had the old reamed paper that you had to punch the whole things on the side.
The dot matrix.
Yeah, just that whole getting all that set up and then just being proud when you actually got something printed off.
It was quite an achievement in those days to turn out something like that. What was your overall impression of the Amiga then?
I loved it, and to me it was one of them. I played a lot of Sega games on it. It was back then. Sega didn't really seem to think of the Amiga, and even going back to the Spectrum days, as competition. They would release their games on everything. I remember, I think it was Alien Storm I played on the Amiga.
I think the cunning plan behind that was they got US Gold to do all their conversions.
Yeah, they were never quite as good as the Mega Drive versions, but the thing with the Amiga was just the size of the library. Like a lot of people, I don't think I actually bought many games for the Amiga. I was just given packs of 200 discs with various games on at various points.
Backups. Yeah.
Yes, lots of backups.
Backups, yes. Yes, I've still got a big box of backups somewhere for my Amiga as well. But I was the same. It was great. I would buy titles every now and again.
Oh yeah, I think I remember having the big box version of Cannon Fodder and various others, Sensible Soccer,
Sensible
things like
Soccer,
that.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I got Sensible Soccer and giant, great big boxes of stuff. But yes, you always had lots of backups available, and that was just great because you could just when you didn't like it, you'd back something else up over it.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to Sensible Soccer, the thing about the Amiga was it had a keyboard, so me and my friends would spend hours putting us and all our school friends into a team.
I thought I was anyone who did that. I'm glad you said that. Makes me feel a lot better now.
Yeah, and just doing leagues against the computer with 4 or 5 of us, just taking it in turns to pick your team. It wasn't just a 2 years around the console with the Amiga. In a lot of cases, for me, it was like 3 or 4 of us playing leagues on Sensible Soccer and things like that. I was never very, very good at it, but I just remember enjoying it a lot.
I saw a friend of mine. We practically every single night we would sort of. He would come down here because he didn't have an Amiga. He had a Commodore 64, but we'd alternate it. So occasionally I'd go up there and play something like My Quiz Pop Quiz because we were that sad. Or Emlyn Hughes is up there, and he'd come down and mine and play Kick-Off 2 or Sensible Soccer. And I think we possibly had at one point sort of 3 or 4 of us round my house playing on the Amiga Sensible Soccer. And I always say I don't like Sensible Soccer. It's not my favourite football game ever, but it was a good game. And you could spend hours putting there's some great team names in there as well. I mean, the imagination of putting all those together, that was absolutely brilliant. And like you said, you could put your own in as well, couldn't you? So
yeah, I think that's why I always preferred the first Sensible Soccer over Sensible World of Soccer, because I think was it World of Soccer that was the one where it had the IS, I call it the ISS version of teams, where they'd slightly change people's names because they didn't have the license. So it'd be Scheller instead of Shearer and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, that was very strange seeing things like that, and I don't know why they bothered really. You try and get because they'd sort of vaguely look like them as well.
Yeah, and the first Sensible Soccer, I don't think it did. It just had random people's names in, and it was all the better for it because it wasn't trying to be something. And I think the other one I remember a lot on the Amiga was the very first Premier Manager game.
Right, I only played the second one. I don't remember the first one. Second one.
Just remember Premier Manager. It might have been the first or second. I can't remember which one it was. I do remember spending a lot of time on it though, which kind of got me hooked into various management games, which I didn't put on these lists, mainly because a lot of people get hooked and play them for hours and hours and hours, and I tend to get hooked and then play a couple of seasons and then move on to something else.
Plus the fact if you spend all these time playing all these games, you won't have time to hunt any food or anything like that, because you could be on this desert island for quite some time, mate. You don't know.
Well, yeah, I suppose I could leave it doing the simulation league until I get back.
Catch all the results afterwards. Set the
Yeah.
printer up so print all the results out. What happened there? Yeah, I mean, it was a great system, and I'm very lucky to have. My 500 went a long time ago, but I'm lucky enough to have another 500 and a 1200. Although the 1200 is the colour of sort of honey. It's a really yellowed one, but yeah, just a great computer all told, and many happy memories for myself on that one. So after the Amiga, then you sort of went with the Mega Drive's nemesis.
Yes, I moved on to the Super Nintendo, which was actually the first console I ever bought with my own money.
Oh right, yes, yeah.
I remember getting it. I think I'd saved up for a paper round, and then putting some birthday money towards it and buying it. And it was the Mario
a lot of
All-Stars.
paper rounds. A lot of paper rounds for that, mate.
It was because it was Gazette paper rounds. It was like 1,000 papers for 20 pence or something.
And it was a Mario All-Stars pack, yeah.
Yeah, it was Mario All-Stars with that one. A friend of mine got it with Street Fighter 2. And as soon as I saw Street Fighter 2 on it, from that day, the Mega Drive never seemed... Even when Street Fighter 2 came out on the Mega Drive, it was like, yeah, but the SNES did it first.
Mm. Do you not think there was some sort of irony with that? Because I always associate Street Fighter 2 with the Super Nintendo. So when it came out on the Mega Drive, plus also the fact it's come out with the Mega Drive Mini as well, do you not think there's some sort of strangeness about that, irony about it?
Yeah, I suppose so, because it was Capcom... Looking back at it, Capcom were always Nintendo for me. I always associate Capcom with Nintendo.
Mm.
All their big franchises were on the Nintendo consoles. Your Mega Man, your Final Fight, your Street Fighter. They were always Nintendo first. So there is a slight irony to it there.
Because I mean, it's sort of like when Sonic games started appearing on the GameCube.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, what's going on here, sort of thing. You'd never thought that would happen, and I always thought Street Fighter 2 would be sort of the jewel in the Nintendo crown.
Yeah,
sort of like, we've got that massive game, this game which everybody's hyped about, which we're charging 65 quid for when it first came out, and the Mega Drive hadn't got it. Because obviously they both had Mortal Kombat, one had the sanitised version, Nintendo, the Mega Drive had all the blood and guts version.
Yeah, and I seem to remember as well, like everyone complains about the Super Nintendo one being 65 quid for Street Fighter. Wasn't the Mega Drive one about 100 quid when it came out because it was packaged with the 6-button pad?
I'm not sure. I do know somebody who did pay £65 for it when it came out, though.
Yeah, I just remember it being really expensive. It was maybe the Super Street Fighter 2 because I think that was a bigger cartridge.
Because the first one that came was the Special Championship Edition, I think, which because I think Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior, and then Mega Drive trumped that with the Special Championship Edition.
Yeah, so
and then didn't they go with Street Fighter 2 Turbo?
I think the order was World Warriors, Turbo on the Super Nintendo, and then that was trumped by Championship Edition on the Mega Drive, and then the Super Nintendo got Super, and then the Mega Drive got Super Turbo, or something like that. They were always one-upping each other with Street Fighter.
Just by adding the word Super or Turbo in front of it. I mean, it's the same. I never actually played any of those versions, so I'm not going to sort of the Super or the Turbo ones to sort of get into that. The fact that what did it add to the Street Fighter 2 franchise? Because most people know it's not my sort of favourite sort of game on there.
Well, back then as a kid, it was there's an extra 4 characters in it, and it's a bit faster. That's all you kind of really noticed.
I think even now, sitting there listening to say, thinking, well, what's the point? It's not really a selling point for me.
I'm sure there's people screaming at the screen now about frame data and things like that, but that most people... I mean, I love my fighting games, but I don't get into them in that detail. I just enjoy playing them because they're one of the few games you can pick up for half an hour and finish the arcade mode and feel like you've done something.
well, ironically, I think for episode 3 I'll be speaking to somebody about sort of Street Fighter 2 because he strikes me as being a bit of an expert. So maybe he'll be able to answer those questions.
Hopefully he can tell us the difference between Turbo and Championship. I'd love to know.
Apart from the fact they're spelled differently, obviously, but yes. So what else did you enjoy on the SNES?
So the SNES introduced me to 2 of my all-time favourite games, and that Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and Super Metroid.
Ah, yes. We'll come to a bit later.
Yeah, they just, to this day, I don't think anything's beat Super Metroid for me. But it was an entirely different experience to the Mega Drive. Most Mega Drive games were very arcadey. And most of the games that I had on the Super Nintendo were not. Basically, there were things like Metroid. What else did I have? Your Megaman X's, Star Fox. I suppose that's kind of arcadey. I mean that blew a lot. You look back now and it's about five frames per second or something. But back then it was
it's painfully slow. It really is.
Yeah.
You don't remember it like that when you play it. I played it fairly recently. I thought it's not quite as unplayable, but it is painfully slow.
It is, but it was 3D polygons. That was well before. Well, I suppose we'd seen it in the arcades, hadn't we, by that point, but not on a home console.
No, you're right there. It was relatively new to what. But I think that was the one sort of big selling point, because I think the last time, I can remember sort of playing things like Driller back on the Commodore 64, the Freescape games, which are sort of like 3D environments moving around. It was all very, very slow, and that was running on a Commodore 64. But when you first saw Starving, it's like, wow, great. And then we see it again years later, you go, ugh. Yeah. You much rather play Lilac Wars, which is much more superior.
Yeah, and it was the first experience I had of Doom as well.
Actually, I played Doom on the PC first. Did you play it on the PC as well?
Yeah, a friend of mine had it on the PC, and later on I would come to it on the PC. But it's one of those things that back then you kind of didn't compare them side by side, did you? You maybe go to a friend's house who had a PC, you play Doom, and then you play that once, and then when you finally got Doom yourself, you play it, and you wouldn't notice a huge amount of even though you put them side by side, you're like, Christ, it's a different game. But back then it was kind of like it's Doom, and it's the closest I'm going to get to that 1,500 quid PC experience.
That's it. I remember a similar thing with playing Kickoff 2 and then playing Super Kickoff on, I think it was my mate's Mega Drive, and they're two, you put them side by side, you're absolutely right, they're two completely different games. But even playing it, I thought, this is not quite right, there's something not quite right with this compared to the Amiga version. But I played Doom on the PC, and I was like, wow, this is just great. I was lucky enough to know somebody who had a decent PC to play it on. And it was a great experience, first time playing that.
And again, it's that frame rate thing, isn't it, as well? I never remember anyone talking about frame rates back in the day, but you played Doom on the SNES, and it is a criminal frame rate on that one.
No, the only thing you talked about was, I think, graphics, possibly parallax scrolling.
Yeah.
And
the Super Effects chip used.
Super Effects chips, yeah. And Mode 7 as well, which is the other thing that came out of that thing, wasn't it? It was, yeah. Do you prefer the SNES over the Mega Drive?
Up until a few years ago, I would have said yes. But when I look at my collection now, I've got the number of SNES games I would want pretty much. But whereas there's a Mega Drive, there's loads out there that I haven't played, and it's got a more varied library, I would say, than the Super Nintendo. So if you offered me, here's a Super Nintendo and all its library, and here's a Mega Drive and all its library, I would probably edge towards the Mega Drive.
I think I would as well, but it would be hard to see. It'd be a hard decision to make. I don't think I could go, oh yeah, definitely that one.
Definitely would, because I'd have to say, well, can I have the Mega Drive, but can I have a Super Metroid as well?
Yeah, and a couple from over there as well, just to sweeten the deal if you want to offer me everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So from the Super Nintendo, when we've just touched on it there, you then moved on to the world of PC gaming.
I did. We were lucky enough, my dad's work at the time were running a scheme. They wanted their staff to be more IT literate.
Right.
So they were doing a scheme where you could do a salary sacrifice thing to get a modern PC. So we got a Pentium 100 with 16 megabytes of RAM and a gigabyte hard drive, which was a lot in sort of mid-90s. That was, it was a beast. It could play Quake. That was...
Well, if you could play software like that, then it must have been a pretty powerful machine, because any sort of gaming like that, you would need top of the range to run it on, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, it was all, it wasn't graphics cards back then, it was all software rendered on the CPU, so you did need that bulky CPU to run it all. I mean, for comparison, The Mega Drive's 8 megahertz CPU, and a Pentium 100 is 100 megahertz, so you've 10 times the processing power there.
Oh, because I remember the very first, because when you start playing back then PC games, you would have to sort of check the specification on the game to see if your system would actually run it enough. And I remember playing. We're talking about football management games, probably Championship Manager, and a new version came out, and I think my system probably at that time was borderline it won't run. And I remember playing a demo of this one of the games, and it was taking forever to do it. I thought, you know what, I'm going to need to get a new computer to be able to play this on, and that's exactly what we did.
You got to that a lot quicker back then, or at least it seemed to. Things jumped. I mean, I remember getting the original Half-Life, and it had a 480 megabyte install. I had a gigabyte hard drive, and I was like, right, so I need to clear half my hard drive. So I just uninstalled Microsoft Office. And any pretense of educational purposes was out the window.
Gone there again, yeah. No, you had to put so much into it to get that, because otherwise. And you don't seem to understand that a PC which couldn't run at the spec the game wanted to, it's just practically unplayable.
It was. I mean, to take that Half-Life one, I got it installed. Now, Half-Life's minimum spec is well beyond what that PC was. And it ran at about 4 frames a minute. Something like that.
It's sort of like trying to play Star Wing now on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. I think it took me an hour and a half to get off the train bit at the start.
I mean, did you get heavily into PC gaming, or did you find yourself sort of thinking, this is all right, but I'm much happier on the consoles?
I did in for certain games. It got me hooked on real-time strategy games.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because back then you used to have shareware, so you get a full third of a game for free in demo discs and things. So things like Age of Empires and Settlers and Command and Conquer, it opened. I was still a big fan of those type of games today. Things like StarCraft 2 and whatnot are just, I keep coming back to because there's a myriad of different ways that you can play them.
And I mean, having played on both, obviously you played on more consoles, which we'll talk about shortly. Do you prefer playing games on PC, or do you prefer playing games on consoles?
If I wanted to relax, I'd always play it on a console. I think with a PC, you kind of, or at least the way I am, you get engrossed in the screen and you're hunched over the keyboard and mouse, and you're in it. Whereas the console, it's a bit more of a still engrossed in the game, but it's a bit more of a passive experience. You can sit back, chill out, and hold a pad. It's why I never was a big fan of the Wii, because I just want to use a control pad. I don't want to wave something around in front of the screen unless I'm playing a light gun game.
No, I could agree with that. In my feelings on the Wii.
I mean, the Wii's actually got one of the most underrated libraries. I think it's just a lot of games they shoehorn in waggle controls, like Metroid Prime 3, for example. You're playing along. It's like, right, twist the controller, slide this, and it's like, can't just press a button. It's a bit more simple.
I mean, we'll touch on it again briefly a bit later, but I mean, that's a good point you make there, and if anything would sort of, be held against the Wii, it's the fact that it was probably incredibly lazy to get games out for it, because people would just bolt on some sort of motion waggle control to make use of the fact that you could do something like that, and they wouldn't concentrate on trying to improve a game or make a game better. It just had that mechanic bolted onto it. And
I mean, I look at if you perfect example for me is the Legend of Zelda games on the Wii. So the first one, which was a GameCube game, they just put on waggle the controller to slash your sword back and forth.
Twilight Princess. Yeah.
And Skyward Sword actually had full range of motion with the sword, so you could deflect and you could angle your attacks to get through shields and things like that. And yes, Skyward Sword isn't a particularly good game, but the motion controls worked because they were built as part of the game. It wasn't just, stick a waggle on there and it'll work.
Yeah, it'll work and it'll sell a boatload of copies, as it did. So that's it, yeah. Let's get back to your gaming listen, because we're probably halfway through your gaming journey there. And you have mentioned a couple of these games already. So if you want to sort of expand those points further with the third game on your games you'd like to be stuck on a desert island with list.
Yeah, so this is Megaman X on the Super Nintendo.
On the Super Nintendo. Right, again, a series I have very, very, very little knowledge of playing on. So if you'd like to, for me, but more so the more uninitiated out there, why this particular Mega Man game?
So this was actually the first Mega Man game I owned. So it was my introduction to the series. I think a lot of it's similar to the Final Fantasy games. The first one you play is the one you love the most, and Mega Man X is the one I love out of the series the most. For anyone who hasn't played a Mega Man game, they're all the same formula. You start off and you maybe do an introductory level or something like that, and then you'll have 9 robot masters that you have to defeat, and you can do them in any order. But each robot will have a weakness. You defeat the robot, and then you'll get his weapon, and that weapon, another robot will be weak to that weapon. So it's about figuring out what order you need to do the bosses in to unlock the weapons. And Mega Man X had extra features that you could find hidden armor on each stages, and hidden power-ups for more energy and life tanks and things. And I just find it infinitely replayable because I can do. You can try and do a default weapon only run and just defeat every boss with the bog standard weapon, or you can try and think, well, actually, instead of starting off with where you should start off with the penguin guy, I'm going to start off with this guy and try and do the bosses in a different order. And there's a lot of replay value that you can make the game as hard or as difficult as you want based on that.
Am I right in thinking these games are fiendishly difficult?
They are, but Mega Man X is probably the easiest in the series.
I might have found one I can play then, because again, you play something once, and obviously through the power of emulation, and not particularly good at them. And I think if something's too difficult, I tend to be put off by that sort of level. So if there is an easier version available, I might sort of go, oh yeah, I'll have a go at that. But I've always found them incredibly difficult to play. Yeah,
it's one of those that I wouldn't say it was easy, but it's not like, it's not Ghost and Ghouls type difficulty level, or even the original Mega Mans are much harder. But it is one of the, if you don't do the bosses in the suggested order, you will find it a hell of a lot harder than if you know. I mean, for example, one boss, you should start off with the penguin guy who gives you the freeze gun, and then you do a guy called Spark Mandrill, and the freeze gun instantly freezes him. So you literally stand, when you get to that boss, you just stand there, you fire a shot, freezes him, fire a shot, freezes him, fire a shot, freezes him, and you'll finish him within about 5 shots. Whereas if you try and fight him with the normal weapon, he just wipes the floor with you. So a lot of it is just trial and error of, hang on, which order am I meant to do these stages in? I mean, there is some kind of logic. So, for example, if you do the fire stage first, the penguin is weak to the fire. There's that kind of weird video game logic to it.
Yeah, because some people when we're talking about it, sort of like, penguin, kill the penguin with this gun and do this particular order, and then you'll better get through and get this. And
yeah, so because the original Mega Man, so Mega Man's, there's actually 2 series. There's the original Mega Man games, and the robot masters in that are all named after just really random things. There's like Cutman and Airman, and they're meant to be like utility robots that have gone rogue or something. I think, like, cutting down trees or something. And then in Mega Man X, it's a different series. It's a new Mega Man. It's not the same guy, and they're all animals. So there's a mammoth, there's a mandrill, there's a chameleon, there's a penguin. They're all. I don't know quite why you would build a robot penguin, but they have done.
Well, because it's there, I suppose, really.
Well,
no one else has thought the idea. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you build a robot penguin, I suppose, if I was a penguin?
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah. Why would you not build a robot penguin? I've got the opportunity to do something. You've probably got a lot of black and white metal left over.
Yeah.
So, an ideal. I've already built a panda, so I'll and a badger. I'll build a penguin. Have you played any other games in the series?
Yeah, so I've on my Switch, actually, I've got the Mega Man X collection, which has got I had to get it from Japan, but it's nice that if you put it detects the language on your Switch and will play it in English. That's quite nice. So it's got the first 4 X games on that one, and physically, I know it's one of my great regrets that I had Mega Man X PAL in mint inbox up until about 2008, and then I moved house and lost a load of my SNES games. And if you go and look on eBay at the prices of a boxed PAL Mega Man X now, you understand why I regret.
Yeah, they ain't cheap, are they?
No, but it is one of those games where it's not really about the story, so you can just buy the Japanese version and just buzz through the little dialogues that pop up, and you'll still get the experience out of the game. You don't really, it's robots fighting each other is about all you really need to know.
Now, we also talked earlier about sort of Street Fighter 2 popping up on the Mega Drive. And again, we got an instance where Mega Man popped up on the Mega Drive Mini.
It did, and the Mega Man on the Mega Drive Mini is a European-only release that came out on the Mega Drive, and it's a remake of, I think, the first 3 NES games.
But again, don't you find that strange? Because I always associate Mega Man with Nintendo. Yeah,
it was. I think it was maybe a bit of a thumb in the eye to Nintendo, because their minis. Did they have Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo Mini? I can't remember. They probably did.
I don't know. I've not got that one.
They probably did. It was one. It's one of the more famous SNES games, but I think it was just Sega going, well, yeah, we had it too.
So, because I remember when you sent the list, I thought, I'm sure there's a Mega Man game on the Mega Drive Mini, and lo and behold, there is. But yeah, that's very strange to find that on there. Very strange indeed. In terms of a series of games, is it a favourite series of yours?
Yeah, I mean, I do love the entire Mega Man series. I mean, it's still going now. 11 was released last year on the Switch.
Nice.
And Mega Man X isn't Mega Man 10, by the way. There is actually a Mega Man 10, in case anyone's confused, because there's that many Mega Mans.
Yeah, I must admit, it did confuse me. So I speak for the common man who doesn't understand these things. So
I think 1 to 6 were the NES, and then 7 and 8 were on Super Nintendo. It might just be 8. And then there wasn't one for ages, and then 9 came out on the Wii and PS3 and stuff. But yeah, it's one of those series that it's typical old school series. They've always got brilliant sort of chiptune music and really classic sort of level design. If anyone is bored on YouTube, if you find a guy called Sequelitis, and he does a video on why the first level of Mega Man X is perfect as a tutorial level without pop-up boxes and things like that. And he does it jokingly, like taking the piss out of modern games of how they would do that level. And it just kind of sums the series up for me of how well thought out it was.
I bought last year sometime, and I was sort of drawn in, but I thought it looks like a Mega Man type game.
Mighty Number 9 by any
chance?
Yes,
that's the one, yes. Which I'm looking at a copy of in my hand at the moment. So I was very fortunate to find a copy in the Game Fire sale for $4.99. It came with all the exclusive artwork as well.
Yeah, it's a poor man, despite the fact it's actually by the original creator of Mega Man.
That's why it's ringing a bell, yeah.
Yeah, he did a Kickstarter, I think. I think it was one of those Kickstarters. And it was one of the famous ones that they did all this promotional stuff beforehand with all these really impressive 2D visuals, and then what was released was nothing like that, and you were
like most Kickstarters, impossibly.
Yeah, it was just like, hang on, you've gone back, but this looks worse. What have you been?
I've not actually played it, but I thought, oh, that looks like sort of a bit. I mean, I read afterwards it wasn't very good anyway, so I thought, well, I only paid a few quid for it, so but I may start with that one before I work my way backwards.
It's perfectly playable, but it's not anywhere near as good as the Mega Man games. It's very average. But I think people were just expecting a bit too much from it.
That's the problem with some games, though, that the hype you get around it sometimes it can never live up to what it's meant to be. And I get the feeling that game was probably one of those. So Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo is your third game. And again, we just touched about it very briefly. Because we're talking about PC gaming. Number 4 on your list.
It's Command & Conquer.
Command & Conquer, another game I don't particularly like that much of, because it's not the sort of game that I like management simulations, but I don't like this sort of game. So why does it appeal to you?
It's kind of because it's a bit similar to management. Before this one came out, I never really liked the ones where you're just given an army and it's turn-based, and that army is it. You've got to find out amount of resource. The thing I liked about Command & Conquer was it was the first real-time strategy I played where you could build a base and you had to manage that economy of the base of gathering resources and marshalling your defenses while still building up an army to attack. And it was the first game that kind of I ever experienced that did that. There was loads before it, but this was the first one where I don't even remember what got me to buy it, to be honest. I remember it was the first game I ever bought by mail order. I remember it arriving one morning before school, and I just about got it installed and played the first level before I had to actually go to school.
The only game I'd played sort of like that would have been, I just trying to remember what it was called, possibly Conflict Europe on the Amiga.
I don't know that one.
We had it in a compilation. We must have picked it up from somewhere, and it was sort of set in the future, and you'd sort of take control of the European army or another army from somewhere else, and obviously the idea is to keep moving around, invading and taking out other armies. And a couple of times I played it quite seriously, but it was much easier just for me to sort of get out the nuclear codes and start a nuclear war. So, after about 5 minutes, I got really bored. I'll just type this code in, then you launch, and it was all over. And it never sort of held my attention for very long.
Yeah, this one was, for me, this was a friend of mine would come home after school for about 3 months, and we'd just play it solidly every night for a couple of hours. Just the version I had was the original release, sort of the early DOS PC one, not the Windows 95 one. And you didn't have a skirmish mode or anything in it, so we just saved the last level because he had access to all the technology trees and everything. Then we just play that last level over and over again, trying different things out. Because I just like the way that it's one of those games, again, for the Desert Island, I wanted something that you can play and you can do different things with. So one of the old tricks, if anyone's ever played the original Command & Conquer, people will know that the AI won't destroy sandbags. It'll just sit there. So you could actually just sandbag right up to their base, the enemy base, and wall them in their own base, and their entire army would just sit behind that wall and never come out. And then you could just freely harvest everything, have this massive army sat there, sell the sandbags, and then just wipe them out. And we just like the idea of we would experiment with different ways of beating them. So we maybe destroy a back wall and send a few engineers in to capture buildings, and then sell the buildings to cripple them, or try different vehicles. It seems fairly limited looking back now, but back then there seemed to be a massive variety of vehicles and different strategies that you could apply to it that were just a lot of fun.
Is it a series you stuck with through, afterwards, yeah? Yeah,
I mean, I've recently bought the limited run release of the remaster of Command & Conquer.
Right.
Because, I'm stupid enough to buy anything that says it's a physical copy, so I just thought it probably would just be a Steam code in a box when it comes. I am a sucker for anything on limited run, and when you get like, oh, it's got a bit of Tiberium in it, I want that. But yeah, I've stuck with them right up until the modern day in terms of, I think Command & Conquer 4 was the last one, but I think there's a remake of Generals coming out, which is a kind of splinter series of Command & Conquer. There's Command & Conquer I've got a theme here of series with really bad naming conventions, because Command & Conquer's got Command & Conquer, it's got Red Alert, it's got Generals, and they're all three different sort of Command & Conquer universes that run alongside each other, and they intersperse when the sequels.
I had no idea they split into multi-universes. My goodness. Yeah. I mean, for someone who doesn't particularly like Command & Conquer games, I seem to collect quite a few of them. Because I definitely got Red Alert, I know that one. I'm looking now at the platinum copy of the PlayStation 1 version as well, because I've got the mouse for it.
Yeah, well, the Red Alert on the PlayStation had Series Link as well, because I seem to remember playing that with a friend. I'd drag my portable telly and a PlayStation and a Series Link cable round to his house to play Red Alert against him.
Yeah. I mean, again, these sort of games just sort of strike a certain chord, and you end up sort of playing them, and then you stick. We talked about the Final Fantasy games earlier. You played that first one, and then you were sort of hooked on to.
Yeah, I mean, this got me hooked on just anything StarCraft, Warcraft. Huge amount of strategy games I've played over the years. Total Annihilation was another one that I used to play quite a lot of. To the point that while I was at university, me and a friend, we actually got that. He was brilliant at Red Alert 2, and through me playing him and having to come up to somewhere near his level to stop getting my ass handed to me every time I played him, we'd team up and through the early days of the online leaderboards, and we'd be. I think at one point we managed to crack the top sort of 50 players on their online leaderboards, which I was quite proud of at the time.
Yeah. That's really good. That's impressive stuff, I've got to say.
Couldn't do it now, mind.
I was going to say, probably a good job you didn't have the word processor all those years ago, because you quite easily could have got hooked on word processors.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you'd never played these. You'd be getting the latest version of Corel and LibreOffice and all this, and you
Yeah,
know,
it's a good job I uninstalled that Office to put
that's
Half-Life.
just imagine what your life could have been like, Chris, if you hadn't done that. So we're halfway through your gaming list, and we're probably about halfway through your gaming journey. So if we'll return to that now,
Yeah.
because we left it at the PC, and then we're probably onto an era now which a lot of people are going to sort of relate to, and I don't know. I would say golden era of games, but the next sort of 6 consoles on your list is sort of describing a time where I was very into my games. So you sort of, I think, pretty much followed the same pattern I did to a certain point. There's a couple of machines on here that I didn't have first time around, but some of these I did follow the path through. So you went from the PC to the PlayStation 1.
I did, yes. Again, this was a console that I bought with my own money.
And me too. That's the first one I bought in my own money.
Yeah, and I didn't. The reason I got this one, I think it was about '97 when I got the PlayStation 1, and the reason I got it then was because that's when they did the big price drop, if I remember rightly. It was when they released they had a range of games that were Sony published ones that were about £35 rather than the £44 ones, and there was a price drop with the PlayStation to match that. I think that's when I got mine. It was around about the time Porsche Challenge came out, if I remember rightly.
Great game.
Yeah, great game. Gernaldinho did that challenge on it, which was great fun to go back and play. Because I only ever, despite it's one of the games I've got in my collection, it's sat on a shelf because I bought it because I remembered the demo and never actually took it off the shelf to play.
I'm exactly the same. I got it at a car boot years ago. It's been sat on my shelf for the same period of time. Rob did that video. I dug it out and I thought, this is quite fun, actually, isn't it? And again, you find stuff like that on your shelves and you think, I bought this ages ago, and you never played it or just sort of sat there. And actually, when you go back and play it, it's actually a bloody good game.
Yeah, I think it's why a lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for this era. This era I equate with the original sort of Atari era, where the graphics weren't brilliant. You had to use your imagination over a lot of time because it was kind of a backward step for graphically, because you had these lovely 16-bit sprites being replaced with fairly recognisable 3D blobs.
Yeah, it wasn't, and lots of fogging as well.
Yeah, but there's a kind of charm to them, I think. Same with the Atari 2600, that if the game's done right and the gameplay holds up, it's still perfectly playable today.
That's exactly what I said at the start about the Spectrum games, wasn't it? If it's created well and done well. I mean, you think it was something like a Vib Ribbon, which I only played the demo of, but I played I had it running at the National Gaming Museum, Gaming Arcade, when it was still in Nottingham. And I played that for a bit, and that was just so simple. It was such a simple idea, and nothing special to look at all. But the gameplay was there, and that's what counts at the end of the day. What impressed you about the PlayStation most of all?
Resident Evil. That was the reason I got a PlayStation, I think. Seeing that.
Not the price drop.
Well, price drop was when I could afford to actually go out and buy one. Strangely enough, I'd seen Resident Evil on. Do you remember the movies, games, and videos?
Oh, on ITV, yes.
Yes, that show that seemed to be always on at random, like 3 a.m. or something like that. It was never on a normal time. It was always all over the spot. It'd either be on mid-afternoon one week, and then the next week it'd be on at like after match of the day or something like that. It was really random.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Resident Evil on that and just being blown away by it. I mean, if I remember rightly, they absolutely slaughtered it, saying it was rubbish. But I saw that and thought, oh, I've got to play that game.
I remember being very impressed and reading a lot about it and seeing it and thinking, yeah, that can't be as bad as people. Not many people said it. Don't remember too many negative reviews about it, but they were sort of about being a bit slow and thought, I'm going to give it a go, something different. And yeah, well, we can see where it is now. I mean, in terms of a franchise, it's just sort of shot along, and there's been a few bumpy ones along the way. But it's just a great franchise.
It is, and funnily enough, with the PlayStation as well, similar to the NES, most of my friends had Saturns.
See, I never knew anybody with a Saturn.
Yeah, a lot of my friends had Saturns because they'd gone from the Mega Drive. They'd just stuck with Sega all the way through. But as you can tell by my console list, I have no brand loyalty whatsoever. I'll just go to whichever one catches my fancy.
Yeah. Was there a reason you didn't go for a Saturn then? Because that obviously isn't on this list.
No, and it's one of the regrets that I never got a Saturn. A lot of the, I think I wasn't aware that Resident Evil was out on the Saturn, and back then, if you didn't buy Saturn magazines or whatever, you would only see what was in the adverts on the telly or in various other magazines. And the PlayStation just did a better job of showing what even games like Wipeout that were on both you think of as a PlayStation title because they advertised it better than Sega did. And I think at the time I was just more aware of PlayStation games, even if they weren't exclusives.
Right. I never knew anybody with a Saturn. Absolutely, it was all PlayStation. Everyone knew that it had a console and a PlayStation.
No, a Saturn, and a friend of mine he would. I think he put me off the Saturn because he would only ever play Sega Rally. You had to go around there, and he had he drove go-karts.
Right.
So you go there, and he had a bucket seat set up with the Saturn steering wheel and Sega Rally, and you had to play that.
But I think anybody who didn't know one like I didn't. It was always one of the first ones I wanted to pick up when I started collecting.
Yeah, it's one of the first ones I picked up when I started collecting again. The consoles I picked up first, I think was the first one I picked up was a NES, and then the next on my list was actually a Saturn.
Yeah. No, it's strange really because I don't particularly like it, but it's not bad. I just don't particularly like it.
I think it's one of my favourite to collect for. I think because I don't have any of them experiences with it, so every game is kind of new.
I'm not sure what it is about it. I think because I grew up with the PlayStation 1 and I just prefer that to that, and I think, well, what can the Saturn do that the PlayStation 1 doesn't? And to me, there's not a lot of difference, really.
The only way you'd find out is with the 2D games, but unfortunately with the Saturn, you're looking at least a ton of pop for the really high-end 2D games.
Yeah, and that's never going to happen. I'm not going to be getting involved in that now. But it's just, I knock it a bit, but it's not bad. It's just I just don't feel an affinity to it. It's I don't know, sort of like asking me to choose my favourite house brick.
Yeah,
which is the favourite brick in your house? Don't know, that one there. That's how I feel about it, sort of thing. But anyway,
I think that one of the reasons I have come back to it in recent years, or I say come back to it, I've discovered it in recent years, is my love of 2D fighters. There's some brilliant ones on the Saturn. But if you're not a fighting game person, then I can see why there's not a huge amount of appeal there, because some of the best games on the Saturn are the 2D fighters.
Yeah, I've heard quite a few people say that, and there was this. I used to think there was a popular misconception that all the great Saturn games were actually imported only from Japan, but again, that's not entirely true.
No, there's some good sort of hidden gems on there that came out in PAL territories, but funnily enough, I think some of the best games on it came out fairly end of life for the Saturn. So they're quite limited to get hold of now, hence the price of them.
Yes, that's right, because it says some of those games are going to command quite a high price tag from anything else, really. So you went to PlayStation 1 and on to...
And then I went on to the N64 within the same year.
The same year, but the money must have been rolling in by this point if you're doing that.
It was that Christmas I picked up an N64 with GoldenEye and Mario 64.
Oh, that'll keep you occupied for a bit, won't it?
It did. I didn't actually. I picked it up because I wanted Mario Kart. I got Mario Kart later on. I think it was around about Easter time after that. But yeah, I'd seen Mario 64 in the various Nintendo magazines when I had a Super Nintendo. And to be honest, it never appealed to me that much. I was like, it just looks blocky and rubbish. But then when you play it, it is one of the best games of all time. I would always argue with that with people. It just... Nintendo nailed 3D platformers right out the gate.
Yeah, it's... I didn't play it at the time. I played it a few years afterwards. And again, I think that was probably on emulation. And again, I just sat down and played it for hours.
I think if it wasn't for the N64's controllers self-destructing, I think it would, it would be more people would appreciate it. But because of the fact that most N64 controllers are, the analog sticks going on them, and people don't find them particularly comfortable. I think it puts a lot of people off going back and trying them out.
Yeah, not the greatest design in the world, and not the most comfortable to use.
No, it was groundbreaking. But yeah,
it was groundbreaking, probably for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who came up with the design of it, but when I first saw it and when I first held one, I thought, "What the bloody hell am I meant to be doing with this sort of thing?" It's completely alien to anything I'd held before.
Did you ever try GoldenEye with 2 controllers?
No.
There's a control scheme in GoldenEye where similar to how you've got 2 analog sticks these days, you can plug 2 controllers in, and one analog stick moves like you have a left stick, right stick now on the 2 pads, and you use the 2 trigger buttons on the back for action and shoot.
I have enough trouble with one control pad and all the buttons on nowadays, Chris. I'm not going to get it. No, but I have heard that. Somebody did mention that to me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's just, I always find it, because if you go back to them old games now, because we're so indoctrinated into how first-person shooters should work on pads, when you're going back to something like that, it just feels really alien to that the analog stick does all your movement.
Yeah, mind you, I did enjoy playing. I'm probably one of the few people actually enjoy playing the single player of GoldenEye, because I know a lot of people play GoldenEye. They play it for the sort of the deathmatch mode. But
I'm with you there. I love the single player of GoldenEye.
I thought it was brilliant, and again, I didn't actually, because I got used, because all my friends had an N64 and I didn't get one. Obviously, probably one of the first consoles I picked up when I started collecting about 10, 11 years ago. And when I actually picked up a copy of GoldenEye, I thought, right, I'm actually going to sit down now and play the single player mode, and it was brilliant, and I really I thought, actually, this game is really, really good.
I always thought it was really well thought out as well. Like each difficulty level you played it through unlocked more objectives that you had to do in the map. So as you played it through and you learnt the maps more, there was more things for you to do in those maps. So I mean, if you jumped straight away and went double O agent or whatever the highest difficulty level was, you'd be like, where do I go here? What do I do? But if you played agent, then secret agent, and then there was a really good progression there, and that I'd never seen in games before. And the fact that you could shoot the gun out of enemies' hands and check the hand and all sorts, it was just way ahead of its time, I think.
Yeah, I think it gets criminally ignored when people talk about it. They're going to talk about the deathmatch, but they don't think about the single player game. And again, when I got stuck years later, I've actually found a magazine I picked up at a car boot, and it was like a complete GoldenEye player's guide. I was like, great, this is fantastic. I can just carry on and complete the game now. So I absolutely love it. What were your opinions on the console as a whole?
It's one of my favourite consoles. It may be nostalgia talking, but I mean, I know you like your wrestling as well. And for me, if you like wrestling games, it's the best console to have. Me and a few friends, we'd come round and we'd put NWO versus WCW Revenge on, or WrestleMania 2000 or something like that. And we'd just do 4-player Royal Rumbles or 3-on-1 cage matches and all sorts. Just really enjoying those wrestling games. I much preferred them over the PlayStation ones. Had all the flash and full motion video for the entrances and really high quality that way. But in terms of playability, the N64 ones were just brilliant.
I think it was a good time don't get sort of bogged down with this, probably a subject in itself, but the whole wrestling game, it was a good time then, because you did have you had the Attitude and the Warzone on the PlayStation 1, and eventually that led to the SmackDown series. You mentioned WrestleMania 2000 and WCW NWO Revenge. There was the World Tour game.
Yeah.
There was the criminally underrated WCW versus the World.
Yeah.
Which I think was a great game. No Mercy, which is probably the one that most people sort of hold the R stick to.
That was the last one, wasn't it? I think No Mercy was the last one, because I think it was WCW vs NWO World Tour was the first one, and then Revenge came out afterwards.
And then what else? Oh, the Dreamcast had a Royal Rumble game as well, I think.
Yes.
So remember serves me correct. So it was a great time to be a wrestling fan, because wrestling was on the rise, popularity, and the games that came out for it, actually sort of finally tapped into that sort of thing. And
and the N64 had the advantage of it had 4 controller ports, so you could have them fun matches with 4 ears rather than either having to get a multi-tap or or all that kind of stuff.